Hello everybody, and welcome. I am the Bibliotech Nerd, and this is our weekly comic book review, where we check out new story arcs from the DC graphic novels collection. I give a short summary, a small spiel on the art and the story. In today's video, we look at the JLA, the Justice League of America, and the Tower of Babel story arc. I will be splitting the story into two, so the first two chapters today, and the last two on Wednesday. Now, the main writer for the story is Mark Waid, and the main artist is Howard Porter. Before I start and jump into the summary, I am going to recite the small intro at the start of the novel to catch people up with the story. So, beginning, forced to combat threats no single hero could tackle alone, the Justice League contains the most powerful and unique heroes of all. Aquaman, King of the Sea, can command marine life to do his bidding. Super strong on land, he needs water to survive. Batman, the Dark Knight, world's greatest detective and master of hand-to-hand combat. A man who plans for every eventuality. The Flash, the fastest man alive. Wally West had taken over from his mentor and former Flash, Barry Allen. Green Lantern, wielder of a will-fueled power ring. Kyle Rayner had taken over from Hal Jordan to protect the universe. Martian Manhunter, John Johns is a crime-fighting super being from Mars with shape-shifting capabilities. Plastic Man, a no-known chemical caused this one-time crook to develop outlandish stretching powers. Superman, born on the planet Krypton, this noble hero is super strong and faster than a speeding bullet. Wonder Woman, warrior of the Amazons, Diana Prince is armed with her lasso of truth and even has an invisible jet. And now that we're caught up with who the Justice League is, it's time to start with a short summary of the Tower of Babel story arc. Part 1. Survival of the Fittest. We start our story somewhere deep in the Himalayan range, with Ra's al Ghul and the League of Shadows. The world has suffered for far too long. The ever-forward marching of progress has caused ecological disaster across the continents. This can no longer be tolerated. A sinister plan has been put into motion by the Demon's Head. It starts with the world's greatest detective, Batman. A once sacred place has been defiled. The parents of Bruce Wayne are now missing. In another part of the world, the Martian Manhunter is being ambushed. He gets hit with a missile which seems to be carrying some unusual nanobots. A little while later, we rendezvous with the Flash and Wonder Woman in Germany's Black Forest. A massive inferno is ravaging the woods and is threatening to engulf Stuttgart. Somehow, the person behind it is the Martian Manhunter. Meanwhile, at the United Nations headquarters, a delicate negotiation is interrupted as Aquaman and Plastic Man are being assailed by unknown assassins. The assailants know what they're doing. They manage to freeze Plastic Man and then shatter him into tiny pieces. Aquaman, on the other hand, gets engulfed by a strange gas. This seems to trigger within him a phobia of water. Rendezvousing back on the Watchtower, the Justice League is having a hard time understanding what is going on. With Batman being preoccupied, trying to get his help seems futile. As such, the task of finding out more information is left to Superman. As he heads to the Daily Planet, another stage of Ra's al Ghul's plan is set in motion. The world can no longer comprehend the written word. Meanwhile, a worried Diana Prince and Wally West go to check up on Kyle. To their shock, they discover that the Green Lantern is blind. End of Part 1. Part 2. 7 Little Indians. Back in the Himalayas, it seems that the world's greatest detective has finally caught up with Ra's al Ghul. This, though, was to be expected and prepared for. The coffins of Thomas and Martha Wayne were precariously over a Lazarus pit. The Bat is stunned at the sight. Meanwhile, back in Kyle Rayner's apartment, over the comms, an alarmed Aquaman attempts to warn the trio. A moment too late, though, as armed assassins storm through the door. While in Metropolis, the wave of dyslexia has caused havoc throughout the city. The world as a whole is crumbling. Hospitals lose the ability to administer proper medicines. Pilots can no longer use their equipment. The wrong push of a button and ICBMs could be flying overhead. Back in the apartment, Wonder Woman is locked in endless combat. The fight is in her mind, but her body races towards a self-inflicted heart attack. Meanwhile, the Flash is paralyzed by a vibrating bullet. Light-speed seizures torment him. Although blind, Kyle attempts to aid his companions. To no avail though, as he is quickly subdued. In a last-ditch effort, Martian Manhunter, in a special Atlantean suit, attempts to rescue the fallen heroes. With his powers having been previously subdued, it's to no avail. Even Superman rushes to aid them. The assassins though are prepared. Red kryptonite brings the big blue Boy Scout to his knees in pain. End of part 2. And that wraps up the short summary part of the video, and I shall be moving on to the opinion piece. Now, I'm going to criticize this comic for quite a bit, but I'm going to start with one positive that I found. So that is the main storyline as a whole. We will of course get better details in part 2 of this series, but from the very start it is quite it is gripping in a sense. The fact that we're thrown into this story where the Justice League is being assailed by Ra's al Ghul and his League of Assassins, and they've somehow found a way to counteract each of the superheroes. It sort of has that movie quality, the fast-paced thriller where you're thrown into the story and you don't need the beginning, you just need to kind of catch up and realign yourself in the middle and then enjoy the story as it goes along. So the concept as a whole, I would argue, is pretty positive. But the idea that the League is so easily counteracted doesn't quite save the rest of the comic as a whole, and the execution, I would argue, is very poorly done, and this is where the criticism is going to come in. Back to the point of it being a fast-paced thriller, I'm going to argue that the pacing of the comic is wrong. What I mean by that is that it is too rushed in my opinion, and it does feel that the story is crudely thrown at us in these small snippets which lack detail or depth to them, and make it seem that we are simply watching some amateur superheroes being easily overcome by some normal humans. There is no great difficulty in overcoming the Justice League. As we're going to see in the second part of the series, it's all quickly made plausible by the fact that it relies on Batman having been this super genius that is able to so easily, by observing and doing a bit of research, so easily take down the Justice League. As I said earlier, although the main story is intriguing, this idea that Batman has created these failsafes, the execution here and the way it is actually implemented, I feel is really a letdown for this comic. Now, the second point that I'm going to criticize is that of dialogue. It's a mixture of two things. Firstly, we have the majority where it feels like you're watching a primary school play where there is no real emotion, and you've got that strange recital where it's kind of just narrating the story for you in a sense. And the second part is the small speeches that is given by Ra's al Ghul. It's a weird attempt trying to make a perception that there's this philosophical idea underneath, in a sense a commentary about society as a whole and its effect on the planet. This point though regarding this section of the dialogue will have to be further looked at in the second part, as the second part will have an extra addition called Blame, which definitely highlights the problem that I think arises from this dialogue. So for now, the dialogue definitely misses the mark, and I'll recontinue this point in the second video, so stay tuned for that. Moving on to the art now, and this is going to get probably the biggest criticism from me. In all honesty, this may sound harsh, but as a whole, the art is kind of dreadful. Continuity of the way that characters are drawn throughout the whole book is pretty much non-existent. I would argue that in some places it genuinely feels that you are looking at separate artwork from different comic books. That's how far different they look between pages. What makes this a really negative thing is that in some panels it looks like an absolute amateur has drawn the characters, and in some the detail is far beyond what it should be. This would bring me to my next point regarding the expressions on their faces. The overcomplex style and the overemphasis of these facial expressions, especially when maybe someone is shocked or hurt, in fact takes away the emotion and realism of the expression. Another point that arises regarding the art, I believe it's called perspective. Bodies are not drawn to the proportions of their surroundings. The fact that in one scene Batman seems like a little wart on a helicopter, yet when he is inside, there's absolutely no space for him to move. Limbs and hands and the general body is not in proportion to itself as you would normally see on a human in a sense. This of course is further emphasized and highlighted as the story goes along with the inconsistency problems where heroes and villains look completely different from panel to panel and bodies do not seem normal and far too malleable. It's not like every comic is able to consistently draw and keep characters perfect throughout the whole story, but here it is absolutely multiplied and the effect is terrible. One point that I have to kind of bring up that really annoyed me was one of the first few pages. You have the scene of the car pulling up to the cemetery. First of all, the proportions of the car were absolutely terrible, inconsistent to a normal car, and the fact that one of the wheels was at 90 degrees out of the position that it should be. I don't believe it is difficult to either pull up a picture of a car on the internet, or if this was drawn before easy access to the internet, I don't think it would be difficult to simply go outside and look at a parked car to get a quick reference. Small and glaring mistakes like that add up and pile on to the already existing problems when it comes to the art. One of such small little gripes would be the planes that are shown in one of the panels. Far too elongated. One of them simply doesn't have any engines except for a strange tail scoop that would take in air and probably not enough to push the plane up into the air. Maybe I've been too harsh, but I generally don't think I have. If you've also read this, let me know what you think. Do you agree with some of the points that I've made? Do you think that the art is actually okay and I'm being too harsh? Do let me know what you think. For now, I'm going to end part 1. On Wednesday, I'm going to release part 2, kind of the wrap up and probably a bit more criticism, but you know, it is what it is. Then on Friday, I shall be doing Vintage Friday, and we'll look at an old Justice League story regarding Starro, I believe. But until then, like this video if you like it, maybe drop a comment, don't forget to subscribe, check out my Instagram in the bio, and I shall see you in the next episode.